It's it works out just great if I sleep in. Whereas by nature, if I don't pull the blinds, come thing, but I'm one of those guys that likes to get up early, and of course that don't go with 2 a.m. finishes in the village, and stuff like that. But I seem to have knocked it pretty good. I've just woken up almost, yeah, which is you play better if you have a little sleep,
You can do anything better if you have a little sleep.
I think so, yeah.
Seems to be a necessary regeneration process.
Okay. So how'd you like to start?
Well, want me to ask you some questions?
What?
Can I ask you some questions?
Yeah, oh sure, yeah.
70 years old, is it like a pedestal where you look down or look around and see things differently?
No, I don't think so, because it all just comes gradually to you, And I look at my brother who just quit playing hockey, he was the original band leader, and then he went on to be an NYU professor of psychology, And so he gave up music. Now he's back in music, and of course I don't see him very often, and he's a year and a half older than me, And I don't see much of a change. He's still very active, and we joke about the fact he finally gave up playing ice hockey, which was probably a good idea at 71. And with me, so far I just feel good and enjoy the music, and I enjoy the whole thing that I do, perhaps even more now, because I've got all the young influences that are great players in the band. And so somewhere in there it all works better, And if you remember all those bad movies they did on big bands, and all that, it's a little better than that. We've only pushed the bus once in the last 8 years, But Hollywood's version of the big band days was quite dramatic, as you probably know, yeah.
Oh. So the Glenn Miller story and the Hollywood movies that portrayed the lifestyle of big band musicians was not accurate. You kind of got in at the end of that.
Yeah.
How was it different?
No, it's just different in a sense that when you're talking about films and things like that, the people that create films, for instance, Pardon Me Boy, is that the Chattanooga choo-choo, and it's boo-wah, boo-wah. Instead of that, it's boo-wah, boo-wah, but nothing about the music was really that much paid attention to in terms of the way filmmakers do it today, where they tend to pay more attention to artistic detail, and all that. It was very romantic, and I'm sure if you were a Glenn Miller freak, you loved it,
Well, you spend a good percentage of the year traveling around in a bus.
Oh, yeah.
What
sure.
percentage of the year do you spend?
I'd say about 8.5 months out of the year.
And back when you first got into the business, when you were traveling around with Kenton and stuff like that, what percentage of the year did you spend?
Maybe 12 months, I'm not sure.
How has it changed?
Well, you no longer, for instance, say to a musician, we're starting on March the 25th, and we'll be out there for 7 weeks. You just say, you got the gig, and that's it. And if you were a, quote, side man in those days, all you did was just say, wow, I got the gig. And you're very happy, and it never occurs to you that the tour is going to end. Woody Herman never, ever, I don't think, I know positively when he hired guys, it wasn't like, and of course, we'll take a few weeks off in, I don't know if he took Christmas off, and...
Well, he had to pay his taxes.
What's that?
He had to pay his taxes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, a lot of guys got in trouble like that,
But it wasn't his fault.
Oh, no, of course not.
No.
Yeah.
In terms of young musicians traveling around on a bus, playing with a band, really invaluable learning experience, right? Good way to develop as a musician?
Oh, yeah, and not only that, nowadays we have to remember the difference is that just as young girl tennis players now threaten or even win like U.S. Opens and things like that because of the educational advantages of International Association of Jazz Educators. I love the fact they had to change their logo about 5 years ago. It was the NAJE, now it has to be the IA. I love that, you know. And we see it when I'm suddenly doing clinics with interpreters. Number one, I think it's unfortunate we call them clinics, and yet I know that master class sounds pompous and all that, but clinic sounds like there's something wrong with the kids, you know. You better go to the clinic and get that taken care of, that B flat minor 7th. Yeah, I mean, but nonetheless, music and jazz education have really come through a lot of great cutbacks and resentment because the school band can't get a new piano, but there's lots of football helmets available, you know, and things of that nature. So I'm a big fan of music education in the schools, and I remember once in an outburst where they asked me to say something after I won some award, and I had just come from my hotel room, such as we're in right here, and watched violence on the street in LA and all that kind of stuff, you know. And if you've ever get on a band bus with the kids that are on the marching band and they're going to a football, and it's just the kind of fun that you want your kids to have, you know. And you know, nobody has the same joy saying, "Hey, wow, today algebra." Never happens, you know. but today is band practice day. Today is you know, and so it's a fun thing. Maybe we can substitute handguns for alto saxophones. I don't know, you know. I didn't. I happen to like that, you know, because I've even received letters from people that almost never played again after they got out of school, and yet that was one of their major memories of their school years, you know. And I think that music education in the schools is really hip. You know?
Do you think that the caliber of musicians that enter your band today, as opposed to the caliber of musicians who entered the big bands in the 50s, is different in any way because of the music education?
Oh,
because it was a whole other way of learning how to play back then.
Yeah, because you'll notice that I was very fortunate in my career, but before we had all this music and jazz education, what we had often was you almost can't find a great improviser anymore who's young who isn't also a fine sight reader. You know, whereas we used to have that. Jimmy Ford, my lead alto player, boy, terrorist, a player. And Willie Maiden would teach him note by note his lead alto part, because like he just never had also that formal education, which people used to even try, and guys that couldn't read would say, well, you remain more natural. That's all jive, man. You know, what it really gets into is having that you can have both. You know, we see examples going from Wynton Marsalis and I mean, but at the classical and the jazz thing to whatever. You know, and now we see it where the musician that comes on my band is maturing at a much earlier age, just like I mentioned the tennis players, and it's why them? Because of their coaching, and in this case the music educators, IAJE, Bill Lee, and all those people that put that thing together, the whole bunch of them. And I think that's one great thing that we did. And when the budget cuts came, we noticed that my band would be hired in a junior high school, right? And they would make money off because of the enthusiasm of the parents. You know, they can't go out and buy TV time slots and stuff like that for a junior high school that's bringing in Maynard Ferguson to play for a night. But by doing what they do, the parents, we always laugh and say, I have the best fed band in the business now, you know, because the parents are involved. God forbid the little girl that plays third clarinet in the marching band, you know, if her daddy owns the Cadillac agency, you know, there'll be posters, there'll be, you know, and we don't even see any of that usually, you know. We just come into town like a traveling band, check into a hotel, and do our gig, and sometimes even hit and run it. And but for the upmanship has come is in the traveling. You know, we the buses now. I don't know how we did it in the old days. We just sat on a Greyhound type bus upright. So did Count Basie. So did Stan Kenton. So did Duke Ellington, Woody Herman. All of them sat right. You know, it was the rock and roll kids that really got us, that taught us a lesson, and it's called Throw Out the Seats. And, you know, and we now have all the glamorous bunks and the cooking things and the sound, great sound in the bus. I probably admire more trumpet players whose names I'm confused with, of the young, from guys in my band saying, hey boss, check this guy out. And they put a set of earphones in my head for 20 minutes, you know. And so a lot of it is up-leveled, and then of course therefore the traveling is not as bizarre as it was in the old days.
Right.
I think that's what I meant at the beginning of our interview, pushing the old beat-up bus and all that. So it's a much easier and better life now.
Yeah. You mentioned trumpet players. Let me name some trumpet players off the top of your head, whatever comment comes to your mind.
All right, but there'd have to be four that, maybe it's because I'm 70, that I probably won't pop out. But certainly, if we're talking who influenced me.
Actually, what I wanted to do, Maynard, was give you the names of some trumpet players and then just get your comments on them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Miles Davis.
Oh, Miles Davis, one of the most creative forces in music. Some people that were, say, classical trumpet players would hear him crack a note, miss a note, and would base their opinion without thinking about all the creative things. As far as the mechanics of the instrument goes, he was not a Bud Herseth of the principal trumpet for the Chicago Symphony, and I don't think he wanted to be that. We must remember that, just like when they talk about me and the double high C's, some of my all-time favorite heroes of the instrument never played a double high C in their lives, you know. They might have thought about it a couple of times, and that was it, you know. So I think we all the great players. I remember I used to spend time with Dizzy, and we'd laugh about doing our own things and still admiring the other thing. You know, it's usually writers and magazines that put it into a competitive thing. You know, when I hear Winton play, particularly, let me see now. What do I love? But Beautiful, I love that, and at the same time. We can go through all, but with Miles, you know, because at Birdland, we were usually on the same bill. They always had two attractions, so it would be Maynard Ferguson and his Birdland Dream Band in those days, and on the other side would be Miles Davis, you know, with Coltrane and Cannonball and Philly Joe Jones and Paul Chambers, et cetera, you know, and it was just marvelous. So intermissions, my band usually did not go upstairs to the bar. It was really fun to be on the same bill. If it was somebody that you didn't care that much for, half the band would be at the bar upstairs, you know. And but Miles was great to play with, and was a great friend of mine, in spite of all the stories you hear. When they found out. When he found out once, oh yeah, I love this. When he found out once that I was about 1/8 Cognawagan Indian, that's a Canadian small tribe. He said, I knew you weren't all white. I knew there was some reason I just love you, you know. And that's Miles Davis, man, you know. And I could tell you Miles Davis, because, you know, like when you do 5 sets a night, you know, even though they're on while you're off and all that, eventually you really get to know each other, you know. And one of the stories that was wild that I can tell is one about a very nicely dressed man in the table section of Birdland, of course, you know, with his son, who was almost dressed identically with the shirt, the tie, the whole thing. And Miles was waiting, you know, no wasted time with Pee Wee Marquette at Birdland, you know. When one band stopped, the other one had 5 minutes and they hit, you know. And even if there was 4 guys missing, you know, my band, I was pretty lucky about that. But anyway, this guy, so Miles and I were sort of standing together. He had just come off, and I was waiting to go on. There's just that 5 minutes, and this man rushes up with his 11-year-old son and says, Mr. Davis, I've always been a fan of yours. I have all your records. And Miles was nice, and he said, oh, thank you. You know, he said, would you say hello to my son? You know, and Miles was just as gracious as could be, and he held out his hand, and the kid sort of whacked his hand. He was kind of cocky, you know, and grabbed his hand, like, you know, and said, yeah, wild, Miles. Hey, you know something? You never played better. And Miles looked at him and said, hey, kid, how the hell would you know? And that is Miles Davis. And while I was like aghast, you know, because you saw the father's face drop, the kid looked funny, and then Miles walked right away, but he grabbed me by the arm. And right near there's the waiter's door and where the band room is. He grabbed me, and he was hysterical in laughter. He never thought of it in terms of any sort of negative output. It was just him really having fun, see? But of course, other people interpreted that sometimes in a different way because it was pretty loud, you know, and those tables and people are real close to you, you know, in a small jazz club, you know.
Clifford Brown and Clark Terry, that infamous session you did with them. Any memories of that?
Oh, I have so many, it's unbelievable, you know. First of all, once again, 2 more of my superheroes, by the way. If we were dealing in the old game called careers, I would say the fame cards came awfully late for Clark Terry, because I always thought of him as one of the great, in spite of my chops and what people say about my chops, I always said, well, I think the perfect embouchure is really Clark Terry's, and it's a natural one. He doesn't have a callus like a working man's hand like I do, and things of that nature. And so when I'm doing my teaching and my master class things, I'm right in there about Clark a lot in terms of who to emulate. Do you remember when he used to go from flugelhorn to trumpet? And it made no difference to him. My brain always clicked, even though I used to go French horn, baritone horn, trombone, trumpet, you know. And funny thing is, it was only in recent years I added the flugelhorn, which is normally the first instrument a trumpet player starts to double on, you know. But I was into the saxophone because my brother was a fine saxophonist, and we used to play duets together when we were kids. So I still play the soprano when I'm doing any of the Indian-orientated things. But Clifford Brown, I considered one of the most. Both of those guys were lyrical. That's what I loved about their playing, and both were very creative, and you could. What I love about jazz music is because I've said all the same nice things, but both of those guys, they don't sound alike at all to me, you know. And Sri Sai Baba once said, it is better to not bother blessing the instrument that you've invented. Better to bless the player, you know. So even though their musical thoughts, I think, were very much the same, and yet you didn't listen to Clifford and say, "Oh, there's Clark's got a new album out," you know. Even though I never was that great at those Leonard Feather blindfold tests, you know. Eventually I'd get corralled and have to do one.
Can we change directions there a little bit, talk about spirituality? Coltrane infused a certain spirituality to his music, I mean, and acknowledged that not really too many musicians today are out front about that aspect of their lives. I know that you've undertaken, once a year you go to India. I imagine you spend time in an ashram. How has that developed as an important part of your life, and how do you think your music reflects it?
Well, I tell you what, the spiritual thing to me is just a part of me, and when I go there, I become like a local high school band director, because, but not for the first 10 years. I would go with my wife, and we'd stay for about, I'd say 6 to 8 weeks there. And it's a beautiful ashram, and very spiritual, and 2 darshans, as we say, a day. That's darshan means merely in the presence of a holy man, you know. And one of the oddities about that I love, 2 things. First of all, he says, do not evangelize. So on my time here with this camera, you know, you won't catch me saying, you really ought to check it out, you know. I don't like that. Or what he says, if you come to me, and I love this, if you come to me, he says, come to me and leave better at what you already are. You know, in other words, don't make him, I won't be a Catholic anymore. I'll be a Sai Baba devotee. That's not
what's his name again, please?
Sai Baba. Or Sri Satya Sai Baba is how he's usually referred to. And he has the finest school system in all of India. And India, you'll find the doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs will get their education either in England or the United States very often, you know, with the exception of this place, where you can go there all the way through universities. And that's why after a few years of going there, for, like I say, a month and a half, he suddenly came to me in his orange robe and everything, you know. And it's not one of those, you know, hand me all your credit cards and your checkbook and I'll show you God. None of that's going on, you know. As a matter of fact, it's very hard to donate there. You have to, he has to, and his people have to know where you're coming from, and well, whether you want to donate to the poor, or in my case, to the music educational system, which he came to me suddenly with all these holy men, and I'm sitting up amongst them, you know, and I was raised with no religion at all. And he suddenly walked over to me, and I'd already played for him, and he materialized this necklace and rings and all that kind of stuff. But and then he would say, do not attach too much importance to materializing things, because they should be only reminders of your true self and your spiritual self, you know. And I didn't mean to turn this into some sort of a, yeah, we'll take this film and let's put it on TV, and I'll become an
No, but I'm curious, personally, I'm curious about this, because I know, like in the 60s, you were at Millbrook, you must have like been on some kind of searching path spiritually, whatever.
Oh, always.
How did you get into this particular cat, Sai Baba?
Well, I got into it through being interested in Indian music. And from the music and the tremendous thing that happened with Ravi Shankar, and I guess it was more him than his association with the Beatles or any of that, but I'm sure that was also at least piqued something. But the music was really where it was at the beginning, and then having a friend, Vimu Mukunda, who's in India a famous Veena player. Veena is the original instrument of Ravi Shankar. It's slightly similar to a sitar, and it's called the mother instrument of India, actually. And so when I lived in England, I would sit with the Indian musicians and play with them. And when I played for Sai Baba in India, I can assure you I didn't have any smoking blues rhythm section. I had tabla players, I had mridangam players, tamburi, veena, all the Indian instruments, you know. And so I would play with them. So at times I would be the teacher, and then a lot of times I'd be the student, you know. When they get into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all these kind of rhythms and stuff, that's where we become the amateurs, you know. Unless you studied with Hank Levy or any one of the guys that has devoted a tremendous amount of their career to the time signatures, or as the Indians say, the talas, you know. But anyway, so with all that, suddenly he said, you ought to Bhima Mukunda, I used him on 2 of my albums in the old days, and he kept talking about Sai Baba because he was from Bangalore, India, which is the nearest big city to Puttaparthi, where this gorgeous school and the grounds and everything are really something. And so eventually I took my wife and all 5 children, and that's quite a thing to do. And we were landed in Bombay with more useless luggage, you know, and things, which is what you do when your first time you go to India, you know, because you don't know what you're going to need, so you bring your house. Yeah, we laughed about that, but a lot of happy porters are getting American-style tipping, so everybody was quite happy. Yeah, very, very happy. Yeah. And so that was the. But it started with the Ravi Shankar thing, and then my wife's a great reader of spiritual books, and that passes on to me, of course, too. You know, and so if you go on my bus, you'll see a puja table. Like instead of having it here, I have it in the bedroom in there, and that's puja means like a prayer table, if you will, you know. And still to this day, every time I go on stage, they empty my dressing room for just a minute, and I do a very short thing, just reminding myself that that I'm making myself happy by doing this, and I wish to make my musicians that play with me happy. And then what I feel is important, I'm not sure Miles agreed with me, but I find it very important to transfer that happiness in an honest way to the audience, you know. And so I'm not a fan of the amen. I play for myself, and that's it. I think that sounds very hip in script. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, your music has always had a very powerful energy to it. As you go around today, a lot of young people who might not even be into jazz because difficult to find in the media are very attracted to you and your music. What is the dynamic of it that you think draws people into it?
Well, I tell you what, the fact is that we won't name names, but in this case, but I have a very happy band. Well, we have a lot of fun, you know. And Linda Mertz happens to be our business manager, and not the booking agent or the management, tour management, but the business management. And suddenly she was in New York just the other night, and half the guys, she was a voice on the phone. She makes up the payroll checks and all that in Ventura, California. And we were so delighted that she wanted to come to New York. and she had such a wonderful time with all the guys in the band. And of course it was wild because right opposite the Blue Note, there's a place the guys like to hang, the Kettle of Fish, yeah, and suddenly she was surrounded by 10 or 11 guys, all the guys in the band, of course, you know, and because they were so surprised to see her, you know, and so the point being that she had the time of her life, and you know, we're laughing and saying it'll be hard to keep her in Ventura, California now, you know, and she's got 2 teenage sons, and well, but she saw that the band was having fun. I know that real great geniuses like, say, Buddy Rich, ruled his band in a different way than I do, you know, and
ruled, that's an interesting way to describe it.
yeah, right, you know, and we all know all the jokes and all the tapes and all that, but sometimes, oh yeah, Tom Garling, who I produce on Concord Records as a producer, his first album is out, and he's still with the band, though, you know, and he was with Buddy Rich, so he can do all the imitations we need. But we used to say a musician that came off that band, and mind you, that was a wonderful band, but he just had the old, was it Toscanini that used to rant and rave at the, yeah, you know, it's different, and again, everybody loved Bernstein. When I did my solo things with him, it was wonderful, you know, and pleasant, and when he made a correction, it always sounded like like a suggestion, you know. It was really a correction, you understand, but just that nice artistic diplomacy, which I think makes, I tell you what, the regimental part of music, playing together, can be affected by the other way positively. But the individual artistry, I think it's a negative if you have a feeling around you of aggression, whatever it is, you know. And I like to give the guys the freedom to the point that with their writing and their playing, that when you come to a rehearsal, if you dyed my hair black, you wouldn't know who the leader was, you know. And that's the way I think it should be.
Yeah.
You know.
2 final things. First of all, you travel around a lot. I don't know if you've spent any time on the internet, but there are a number of Maynard Ferguson sites on the internet.
It's funny, your timing is perfect. Last night, the first show last night, it went all over the world, and there was like tech things, and apparently you can't download, and it came from the Blue Note, the whole set, and people who watched said it was fading in and out, but they just loved doing it. And you're right, there's Matt Keller, these are the few predominant ones that I know. Matt Keller in Iowa, and he was at the show the other night, and the same thing with, I'm sorry, I don't know his phone, I can't even hardly say, I know, anyway, from Amsterdam, and there's a whole bunch of them, so it's very exciting, and I want to tell you one thing, boy, when it comes to high tech, you know, the guys in the band for my birthday gave me this watch, and I've got to find out how to set it, and I'll probably give it to one of the guys and say, set it for me, you know. And anything musically electronic in the studio, I'm into. So I guess you can say I'm not very versatile when it comes to really understanding websites and having it myself. I don't own a computer as yet. I now have started to threaten to own one. I don't have to have a thing. I love it. The guys are, the bus is loaded with them, you know. And maybe that's why I get lazy. I can just ask them, you know. But whereas part of me would like to get into it, that's a time-consuming game.
Very.
Yeah.
Very. Do you think you're going to be able to maintain this pace? I mean, how long do you plan on going on like this? It's not easy being on the road, and the trumpet is a cruel taskmaster.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's right. But at the same time, it's almost like as long as I enjoy it, which I know that will be forever, only as long as my health and everything feels good. And I'm looking for something wood. So far, I've enjoyed very good health, you know, and I think that that's probably about the only way to answer it. It just seems like this is what I was meant to do. I love presenting all these young, great players, and I always say, if you're going to leave my band, I'll only be mad at you if you're not a big success of what you're going to do next, you know. And because all the Don Ellis's, Peter Erskine's, Wayne Shorter's, I know I'm leaving out a million, not a million, but at least a couple of hundred guys have gone on to be very successful at whatever they want to do after Maynard, you know.
Yeah. Okay, to wrap this up for the magazine,
Yeah.
What type of trumpet do you play? What type of mouthpiece?
Okay, I play the MF horn, which is made for me by Holton /LeBlanc Corporation in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I've been into designing trumpets. I've never understood piano players, for instance, that can't tune a piano. I find that amazing. I mean, that would be one of the first things I would, if piano was my instrument, you know. And so I became involved in designing when I was living in England those 8 years with the British Band Corporation. And from there, then, when I came back to live in the United States, I was immediately approached by the people at Holton, the Vespucci family, and I worked with Larry Ramirez. In other words, I didn't just give a name. You know, you can do it like a golf player does it. You know, Maynard Ferguson plays that model. Instead of that, I was playing on the stand with 3 leader pipes all taped together, and until I got what I really wanted, you know. So I've been designing instruments for Holton, and they're called the MF horn, and then I also, along with Larry Ramirez, because you don't put me behind a lathe, man, I might lose my fingers in the first, but a lot of trial and error things. The Firebird is a slide trumpet and a valve trumpet at the same time, and the Superbone is both a slide trombone and a valve trombone at the same time, you know, and things like that. And then I have 2 bores, meaning depending on how much you want to fill a horn and the type of player that you are, whether you want to put that much of an airstream through a horn, and all that. That's why the was really a medium bore and a very large bore, which is the one I use mostly. And anyway, they're called the MF horns, the trumpets are. And then my mouthpiece is by Dave Manette, and he's the guy who makes all those marvelous trumpets for Wynton Marsalis and a whole bunch of the guys, and a lot of the symphony principal trumpet players, and all this, I shouldn't say just the principal trumpet players, but he's just a marvelous horn maker also, you know. And he and I are great friends. We eat Indian food together, and he makes my mouthpieces. And so...
Any electrical hookups or anything you use?
I have in the past. When I had the high voltage band, which was, you know, the one other horn player and a monster rhythm section, you know, and that was called High Voltage, and I did that for 2 years, and it was all involved in the computerized electronics that are so much a part of today's music. And from that, I enjoyed that. But somewhere around the second year, I started to get bored with it. But I remember once turning around from the audience and started to conduct, and I realized I was conducting Dennis de Blasio. And I was, you know what I mean? Nothing sillier than a 2-horn band and a guy out there conducting, you know. So we, I think that was the key to, this isn't really my niche. But out of that, I became a better producer. I also produced Christian Jacobs' first album, and that was fun with Petitucci and Peter Erskine, whom I got, that's Lake alumni, and so I enjoyed putting them together because I think of, I just think of him as a genius piano player,
Yeah.
and he happens to be married to my youngest daughter, and yeah, she was a pupil of his when he first came from France. You see, Christian came as a teacher at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, and my daughter was there studying music, and that's how they met and got married. So, but even if my daughter had, even without that, it was a privilege to produce that album. I was talking with Bruce Lundvall the other day about it, and he said what a great job I'd done as a producer. And I said, guess what my best talent is as a producer? And it's the only time I keep my mouth shut. But that depends on the extreme talent. And then you open it when you really have to open it, But I think when you've got tremendously creative people in the studio, it's not necessary to feel like the captain on the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One final thing. Also with the feature in JazzTimes, they run a little box that says listening pleasures. Could you recommend 3 CDs? They could be yours or they could be others.
Wow. Wow. That one's really hard.
I can imagine so.
Well,
let's take one of yours. What?
For mine?
Yeah, let's try one of yours. From any period.
Oh, if we go back to the early days, I think I have a fondness for the Message from Newport, with Frame for the Blues, Slight Hampton's composition, and his playing, and I consider him a great genius. He owes me a chart, that's right. And and he's even got a new version, out of Frame for the Blues.
Yeah.
It's terrific,
Yeah, I've heard it.
And,
What about music outside of jazz? Anything classical, Indian, any other?
Oh, well, Indian, then we get into all those guys whose names I keep forgetting how to pronounce. But, oh, yeah, I listen to a lot of Indian music, and now Rana Swansky and I are working on a new suite because, of course, we have the Sai Baba suite that I wrote while I was in India, and that's a fusion, of course, of jazz and classical Indian music. That one's based on a traditional South Indian raga called Bhairav, and we loosely, because we're jazz players, we stay with the raga for a short while, then you catch us putting in all our blue notes and things that shock only certain kinds of classical Indian players. But once they realize that it's a fusion, it's a fusion of jazz, and we did not go to it's easier to go to the rock with the even eighth notes because that's often what they're playing rather than the jazz rhythm. But Chip McNeil did a great job on the orchestration too, by the way, and actually I enjoy doing that, and it really does work because, of course, the difference between our culture, musically speaking, and theirs is that their classical musicians have to be great improvisers. Ours, they've even forgotten about improv because on the harpsichord, for instance, Leonard Bernstein was a great improviser, and everybody would say, "Oh, really? Like, why does he want to do that?" And because in a sense, you could say us improvisers are really like Bach. If we'd had a Sony Walkman around then, there'd be 10,000 more Bach etudes, because he just sat down and played what came into his head, and So I think that it's a nice fusion is what I'm trying to say. And the Indian musicians seem to love it. When I play with my band, I took them to India and to Sai Baba's ashram, and we played our fusion thing, if you wish to call it that, you know, but based on their traditional ragas. The new one is called Shanmuga Priya. Gosh, I can't wait for disc jockeys to do that one in. I know, here's Shanmuga Priya on rotation.